Hi, all right. We've got people joining us, and welcome everybody to the afternoon of day number 3 of the 24/7, 24/3, I should say, 24 hours a day, 3 days in a row, HITLAB summits. And we are super happy to have with us today a session about oncology, and really an important part of the oncology information system process, which is this idea that we're able to optimize not only the recruitment, but also the role of being able to use machine learning and statistical analyses, Bayesian statistical analyses, to be exact, to be able to optimize patient recruitment so that patients will in fact be involved and stay engaged in their study over the full course of the study. And as you can imagine, in clinical trials today, particularly given the pandemic and its nature, it is an unbelievably difficult task to do that. And so I've got Zina Manji from GlaxoSmithKline and Eric Novick from Generable joining us today to discuss this role of digital health in clinical trials, and more specifically within the recruitment of patients. And so along those lines, let's get a little bit more background on this issue that we have right now of patient dropout during clinical trials, which is a major issue that we're facing across the ecosystem, across research studies. Certainly at HITLAB, we're seeing that tremendously. We're seeing just an extraordinary issue of patient follow-up and lost to follow-up and just patient dropout from studies. And then also at Columbia University, and I know a number of life science partners are also in that situation as well. And so we, again, are in a situation now where it is mission critical that people are able to actually really find new methods to actually accelerate their patient analysis and their ability to understand which patients will stay in studies longer and complete the study. So with that, let's hear a little bit about Zina from GSK. Zina, if you could give a little bit of background on yourself, that would be great. So in the meantime, let's take some questions from our attendees. We have people from around the world who've taken the time out to get the and some of the educational components of this year's summit together. So it'd be wonderful if you, if the attendees had some questions as well around clinical trials, patient optimization. Again, I see some folks in the galley who are from life sciences, some from academic research. It would be wonderful to hear the questions and to see any questions that they have about some of the issues in clinical trials recruitment and in patient optimization through the clinical trials process. And again, it is of consequence to note that clinical trials in general, when they are running in today's ecosystem, are running at about $15,000 to $25,000 per patient. So losing a patient when a clinical trial, in fact, when a patient drops out of a clinical trial, it becomes a substantial cost to the study. And remember, everybody in the audience as well, then when we cannot recruit enough patients, or if we have patients that drop out and that number goes above 20%, the actual statistical validity of the study begins to become significantly deteriorated, and above 25% or 30%, the statistical value of the study becomes completely invalid. So we have within this framework a very brutal structure that studies, even during a pandemic, have to maintain a certain amount of patient follow through in the midst of this. And so the use and the ability to apply statistics to ensure, and machine learning on top of that, to ensure that patients are going to remain viable in a study over the course of an entire study becomes an extraordinary value creation within the course of the study. As anyone who's done clinical research knows, recruiting patients and subjects in studies is the most difficult part of the entire process. Studies are delayed because of patient recruitment, although it's often tied back to design. It is something that is problematic and difficult to do. And then once patients are enrolled, now the clinical teams have invested immense amounts of different resources into those patients, enrolling them, and now beginning the process. It includes obviously the time to educate them and the time to bring them up to speed on the study, and then also the actual study materials. So biotech or molecules that they're testing. So with that, we do have Zina Manji. Zina, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and just give them a little bit of background on your yourself and your role at GSK.
Yeah, hi. My name is Zina Manji. Sorry, it's been difficult joining in today. So I'm lead for regulatory affairs for innovation at GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare, and I work in innovation, working with startups, as well as co-developments and internal developments in disruptive new areas for self-care.
That's fantastic. And again, I really appreciate you joining in and participating in the session today. Tell us a little bit about the role of digital health right now at GSK and what role digital is playing in a global pharmaceutical manufacturer like GSK.
Well, I think more broadly, we had some conversations on this yesterday in one of the panels I was in. Digital health, I think really it's about companies really understanding their drug therapies better in terms of do you have the right therapy, the right patient at the right time? And I think that's a large part of the initial drive in looking at digital tools. And I think decentralized trials has really advanced at a rapid speed, a lot more work to do, but I think with development of biomarkers and ways to learn more about the patient. I know Medtronic said this at a session 3 years ago that really inspired me, was it's about making the patient a better patient. And I think that's ultimately where companies are going and focusing on in terms of the initial aspect. I think when it comes to trials and, you want to make sure you've got the right patients in your trial on your therapy. And I think what these new tools help us to investigate in terms of looking at genetics and other aspects as well in using these tools is, are we actually testing the patients that are best and can best benefit by the treatment that we're going to be studying? And I think that's the other aspect. So then when you look at the evidence and the outcomes, you have a much more deeper understanding of those outcome measures. And then from a patient care and self-care aspect, look at chronic conditions and ways to keep the patient or keep consumers healthy, as well as in chronic conditions, avoiding flare of chronic conditions. These are all also aspects of where digital health. So really it's about looking at that patient journey, that consumer journey in their healthcare, and where can these tools and innovations help to make that more seamless and easier and useful and meaningful for ultimately the patients, consumers, and also within the healthcare system. And what are the right times that interception should occur? And I think we're getting a lot of feedback and understanding of how to do that in a much more meaningful way.
That's really important stuff. And I think, if you think about, again, Zena, you're one of the digital health leaders in life sciences, and we appreciate you joining us today. We know how busy you are. And just talking about, you just brought this up, decentralized trials, and how important it is in a decentralized trial environment to ensure that you're optimizing your patient recruitment, enrollment, and maintenance throughout the entire study, so that they go from first patient in to last patient out without losing patients. And so, and it is brutal in a virtual environment like we're working in today. And Eric, again, thanks for joining us, and appreciate your time today as well. Tell us a little bit about you're one of the data science gurus at Columbia University, and having come out of there and founded Generable. Tell us a little bit about how Generable and what you're doing with statistical modeling and STAN, the actual programming language, what you're doing to enhance and help life science companies maintain patients throughout the studies from start to finish.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So yeah, we're focused on a very specific area in drug development, particularly on oncology trials, where we see some of the biggest problems in terms of the ability to recognize which compounds would actually succeed in late-stage trials, right? You've got on the order of 75% or so of late-stage trials, phase 3 trials in oncology failing. And just in comparison, about 80% of the vaccine trials succeed. And so something is broken, right, in terms of identifying the right molecules for the right or right combinations for the right cohorts in early stages. And so what we have done, we've been developing this, continuous learning platform that's, based on the Bayesian inference. It's built with a probabilistic programming language called STAN, as you mentioned, that was co-developed by us at Columbia, and now is a fairly large and successful open source project. And what we try to do is to come in at relatively early, from first in human phase 1 to early phase 2, and look at all the molecules that are under consideration, and then have a much better predictive model of what is likely to succeed and what is likely to fail. And these models, they're instead of kind of using just the observed data, a handful of patients, and looking at those outcomes, which is what is being done today, instead we train these models on lots of trials that have been completed already. So using all these assets that have been built up to understand the treatment response in different populations under different drugs, be it chemotherapy drugs, to targeted therapy, or the new IO drugs. And then having this model and encoding some of the biological aspects of disease progression, we then make a probabilistic prediction relatively early of what we may see in later trials. And in some of our validation studies, we have seen that it outperforms the current methods by quite a bit. So, we're still pretty early, but we're excited to kind of move the needle, specifically in the oncology drug development.
That's fantastic. And, again, we're coming up on time here, but certainly, Zena, just to wind it up here, what, from your perspective, looking at the importance of optimizing patient engagement within clinical trials, utilizing these sorts of statistical models, what is the role that you can see these sorts of this kind of company playing in life sciences over the next 5 years relative to clinical trials as they move into a decentralized pattern?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think when you look at drug discovery and drug development, it's a traditionally very long pathway, right? And trying to look at all different types of patients at different states of their condition does cause some confounding aspects that you need to harmonize for and understand that evidence that comes in. So I think tools like this, as well as biomarkers and development and validating markers, is really going to make trials more precise and more meaningful with less noise. And I think that's really will lead to better understanding of the adoption of the therapy. So ultimately, I think, where we're trending is more precision. And I think tools like this are really important to go towards that end, and perhaps even get to shorter development cycles because you're going to be more targeted in your approach.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you both for joining us today. And again, I greatly appreciate your time and know you guys are absolutely slam busy with the end of the year. So if we don't catch up again, have a great day, a great weekend, and a great holidays. Take care.